Jordan, I want to start with you. What do you make of what Microsoft says they have done here in terms of taking over and shutting down these 6 different websites and 84 such sites over the last 2 years?
Sure, Emily, here's the thing. You know, what Microsoft has done here, you really have to take your hat off to them. I mean, this was a masterstroke of marketing, kind of more than anything. It's really important that what Microsoft did, they took out these domains that the Russian hackers who, are accused of being behind the 2016 election hacks here in the States, were apparently preparing another type of attack. But what they actually disclosed today was they took down 6 kind of ordinary phishing or typo squatting websites. This wasn't an actual hacking campaign. This looked more like preparation. So it's great that companies are taking more initiative in taking these sites down, being more proactive about countering some of these Russian hacking threats. But kind of reading the release, I mean, it looked a lot more like a product announcement than kind of a real security announcement. But that's not to take away from the fact it's important to take these sites out. But this was the kind of thing that might have gone unnoticed a couple years back.
In fact, during the interview with Microsoft President Brad Smith, officials in Russia said that Microsoft was on a witch hunt, and Smith assured that there would be no witches at the end of this hunt. They're very confident in what they have found and that Russia is indeed behind this. I mean, if so, Jordan, isn't it important that these sites have been thwarted and has a threat on democracy, been in fact diffused, or do you think this is no big deal?
Oh, no, I think it's actually really important. I mean, one thing to really note, I mean, despite, potentially some cynicism around some of these issues, is that Microsoft's team really knows what they're doing. So if Microsoft comes out, one thing that's really rare is that Microsoft came out, publicly attributed, this infrastructure to that Russian group. So when Microsoft says that, I think we should all take it very seriously because they know what they're doing. So I think this is all really good. These are good advances in cybersecurity and protecting, the 2018 midterms from potential meddling, but it should just be noted that what was done today, was kind of eliminating potential staging areas for a future attack versus stopping an actual attack. So it's great, though, that Microsoft and other companies are taking this more seriously than, potentially in the past they may not have paid quite as much attention to it.
I did ask Brad Smith why Microsoft is doing this, why more so than other tech companies, and why is it their responsibility and not the responsibility of the U.S. government. Take a listen to what he had to say.
This is a moment in time when we should reflect as a nation, and really across democratic societies around the world, that 21st century democracy will flourish only if we take new steps to protect it. And these steps cannot be confined to one political party or to people in government. We need to come together in the tech sector, across the tech sector, and in partnership with democratic governments around the world.
David, what do you make of this, given that other tech companies have been so, sorely criticized for enabling these attacks to happen in the first place?
I actually think Microsoft does stand out for the seriousness with which it takes the idea of working with society and government in order to do things that protect society. Brad Smith is one of my heroes in the industry, and he is an unusual person. First of all, he's a rare baby boomer leader at the top level of the tech industry, and I think he has more experience than some of these other people. But what I found so cool about this is that Microsoft has been working under the supervision of a judge with a special master in a court in Virginia since 2016. So they had the mechanism in place with the special master's permission to immediately effectively shut down these sites as soon as they were identified. So if you think about the things we need to do to keep order in this moment we're in the world with the digital economy under attack in so many ways, we do have to come up with new mechanisms for rapid triage when problems are discovered, and to search for things like the registration of web domains algorithmically, which is what I'm sure Microsoft was doing, is a very smart thing that we haven't heard about before.
Microsoft is also expanding their Protecting Democracy program. They are offering cybersecurity, Jordan, to federal, state, and local candidates, campaigns, think tanks, political organizations. How effective is this kind of cybersecurity support, if you will, for these even local candidates?
Oh, I think it's great. I mean, to David's point, you know, a company like Microsoft brings tremendous resources to bear on a problem like cybersecurity. You know, they just have visibility into so many parts of the digital universe that, you know, very few companies have. So when they approach a local or a state or a county government, you know, and offer some of that kind of wraparound protection, you know, that's always going to be helpful because those services can be quite expensive, you know, and Microsoft brings a unique set of capabilities to it. So I think this is all great that companies are really trying to pay more attention to these issues. And to David's point, attack some of this stuff before it really happens. And Microsoft has really been a leader, you know, in that space in trying to create those mechanisms for kind of blocking some of these attacks really before they happen, because that affects its entire user base, potentially.
In the meantime, David, you have some saying that some of the steps that Trump has taken have made us more vulnerable to cyber attacks, and that things like revoking John Brennan's security clearance means that certain former officials and advisors won't have input into these kinds of situations at the government level.
Well, it's a whole different discussion how the Trump administration is relating to this set of problems. There were hearings in the Senate today where there were a lot of angry senators in both parties about the administration's approach to this entire set of issues. My question is, why isn't the government the one finding this stuff? Why do we have to wait for Microsoft to do it? Or why isn't the government more proactively saying, here are the threats that we're shutting down? Why do we have to see private industry only doing it? Obviously, it's great that Microsoft has done it. I applaud it. But really, the government should be doing it.
Jordan, why isn't the government doing it? And have, you know, potential government operations been crippled by the way that this administration is operating?
Well, it's a pretty multi-layered question. I mean, one of the issues that we've heard from U.S. officials is that, you know, there's a real kind of disconnect between, there has been historically, between the federal government and the states and local agencies that run these elections. Now, since 2016, a large number of state and local officials have gotten the security clearances they need to talk to organizations like DHS or the FBI and get classified information. But here's the trick with that. When an investigation is classified or indicators of compromise are themselves classified, makes it very difficult for the government to share certain pieces of information. So you hear this from federal officials all the time. They say sometimes we're kind of caught between a rock and a hard place in terms of what do you share, you know, do you expose sources and methods in releasing certain data? We saw this with DHS. It took DHS, you know, over 2 years to formally acknowledge that the majority of states in the U.S., 39 was the number we reported, you know, were targeted by these Russian hackers. And a big reason for that was, you know, more than half of those states were currently under investigation that were classified. So it just presents a real conundrum for the government in terms of what do they actually share with states. But I think any state would tell you more is better.
Well, it's just also worth adding to that, which is a very good point, that this is not confined to the United States by any means. There are researchers in a number of places, notably the University of Toronto, that have identified scores of countries where the Russians specifically are attempting to conduct electoral interference using digital means, whether it's Facebook, whether it's spear phishing, whether it's false domains, you know, all kinds of ways. And the Russians are incredibly aggressive and incredibly effective, and we've got to figure out new ways of combating that globally.
Jordan, whether this was effective marketing or not, do you think this is just the tip of the iceberg in terms of the actual threats right now on the U.S. midterm elections and other electoral processes around the world?
Absolutely. We're going to see a lot more of it. What Microsoft's announcement today really shows is that there's going to be a lot more of this heading up to the 2018 midterms here in the States, and to David's point, everywhere else as well, because what we've spent a lot of time focused on voting machines and can the Russians hack the vote. Totally valid conversation, you know, but really where the Russians excel is at these information operations, where if you can get somebody to give up their Gmail password and you can dump the contents of their Gmail account, you know, onto the internet, like what happened in 2016, you know, that's a really highly effective operation. You don't have to hack a single voting machine at all. So these are kind of like low-risk, high-reward operations, and there's really no reason for the Russians not to engage in more of them. So, you know, hats off to Microsoft for doing a great job and getting some of these domains knocked down. And we're going to see a lot of other security companies kind of trying to do the same thing. And it's going to be more signs that, you know, that there are going to be threats to these elections here and elsewhere.